Every classroom holds a living blueprint, and the architect of that blueprint is you, not the curriculum, not the textbook, not the administration. You, the teacher, are the single variable that determines what gets built inside those four walls. Your teaching style is either constructing students from the inside out or quietly dismantling them before they ever discover who they are. That is not opinion. That is neuroscience. That is psychology. That is the lived reality of thousands of students who still carry their teachers inside them long after the school bell rang for the last time. This video is your mirror. Ask any adult to describe the teacher who changed their life. They will not cite a lesson plan. They will describe a feeling. The way she made me believe I was capable. The way he refused to give up on me, the way that classroom felt like somewhere I actually belonged. Now ask someone who checked out of education early. They do not blame the subject. They blame a teacher who made them feel small, stupid, or invisible. Teaching style is not a methodology. It is a message, and students receive that message long before they understand the content being delivered. There are two types of classrooms in every school. From the outside, they look identical. Same desks, same boards, same curriculum documents pinned to the same walls. But inside, entirely different worlds are being built. In one classroom, students walk through the door and their shoulders drop. The tension leaves their body. In the other, their muscles tighten the moment they enter. One classroom trains confidence, the other trains fear, and both are doing it every single day, deliberately or not. The question is never whether your classroom is shaping your students. The question is always, how? Teaching style is not simply your delivery method. It is the emotional atmosphere you construct and maintain every single day. It is how your face responds when a student gets something wrong. It is whether your voice carries warmth or weight when you correct someone. It is how long you wait before jumping in with the answer. It is what your posture communicates when a student speaks. Your teaching style is the sum total of thousands of micro moments, each one happening fast, most of them unexamined, and every single one is either depositing confidence into a student or quietly withdrawing it. Research from the American Psychological Association confirms what the best teachers have always known intuitively. The teacher-student relationship is one of the most powerful predictors of academic outcome, more powerful than class size, more powerful than school resources, more powerful even than the quality of the curriculum. The relationship is the curriculum. When students feel genuinely safe with you, their brains open. When they feel threatened, their brains shut down, measurably, neurologically, completely. This is not a metaphor, this is biology, and it begins and ends with the one variable you control entirely, your teaching style. Most teachers do not wake up intending to break students. The breaking is almost always unconscious. It lives in the habits, in the unexamined routines, in the inherited patterns passed down from teachers who came before. We teach the way we were taught, unless we make a deliberate choice to do otherwise. That is the invisible inheritance of education. And unless you pause and examine your style through an honest, undefended lens, you may be passing forward damage that was originally done to you without ever knowing it. The cycle only breaks when one teacher decides to look. Before we go any further, let me be clear about what this video is not. It is not an indictment of teachers. Teachers are among the most undervalued, overextended professionals on the planet. They carry the weight of entire futures on underpaid, underappreciated shoulders. This is not a verdict. It is an invitation to look at your classroom the way your students actually experience it, not the way you intend it. Because intent and impact are not always the same thing, and the teacher who grows is always the one who remains willing to close that gap honestly. Here is the central question underneath everything we will cover today. Is your classroom a place where students discover they are capable, or a place where they learn to doubt that they are? Everything else is secondary. The content, the method, the lesson plan, those are the vehicle. The answer to that question is the destination. And students are arriving at that destination every single day, shaped by decisions you are making whether you are paying attention to them or not. Today, you will start paying attention to them, and that shift alone is a powerful beginning. Let us talk about what breaking actually looks like, because it rarely looks dramatic. It does not arrive announced. It seeps in through repetition. A dismissive sigh when a student answers incorrectly. A casual comparison between two students sitting in the same room. A laugh when a child mispronounces a word. An eye roll that only 3 students see, but that all 30 somehow feel. Breaking is not always a shout or a scene. More often, it's a slow erosion, a quiet daily chipping away at the belief that effort leads somewhere worth going. Repetition makes it permanent. The first pattern of a breaking teaching style is what I call the shutdown. This is the teacher whose response to a wrong answer shuts down all future attempts. A student volunteers, gets it wrong, and the teacher's reaction, in tone, posture, words, or the combination of all 3, sends one unmistakable message: you should not have tried. Maybe not in those exact words, but that's what's received. And the student who receives that message 3 times in a single week will stop raising their hand. Not because they stopped caring, because they learned it's safer not to. The second breaking pattern, the comparison classroom. This teacher uses ranking as a motivational strategy. Why can't you be more like her? Look at how quickly he finished. The belief is that comparison ignites drive. What it actually ignites is resentment between students and towards the teacher who manufactures the comparison. The student who consistently wins the comparison becomes arrogant. The student who consistently loses becomes ashamed. Neither outcome builds a genuine learner. Comparison as motivation is a shortcut, and it costs far more than it ever saves. What looks like push is really just pressure with nowhere healthy to go. The third breaking pattern is public correction as performance. Some teachers correct students loudly and dramatically in front of the full class, as though humiliation is a pedagogical tool. It is not. What it teaches the student being corrected is this: being wrong here is dangerous. What it teaches every other student watching is do not be wrong in front of this person. The classroom goes quiet. Voluntary answers become rare. Risk-taking disappears entirely. And a classroom that stops taking intellectual risks has stopped learning, regardless of what the lesson plan says. You silenced them, then called it discipline. The fourth breaking pattern, the unpredictable teacher. This classroom does not have an emotional climate. It has an emotional weather system. Some days the teacher arrives warm and encouraging. Other days, without warning or explanation, they are cold, sharp, and impatient. Students spend significant cognitive energy reading the room before they can engage with any lesson. That mental energy is borrowed directly from learning. Students cannot monitor a perceived threat and simultaneously absorb new content. The brain always prioritizes survival. An unpredictable teacher is an unsafe teacher, not by intention, but by consistent impact. The result is the same either way. The fifth breaking pattern, fixed mindset framing. This teacher communicates, through direct statement or ambient implication, that intelligence is a fixed quantity. Some students simply have it, others do not. It surfaces in phrases like, "Not everyone is built for this subject. Some people just don't get it. Maybe this isn't for you." Every one of those statements lands like a sealed door inside a developing mind. And the devastating reality is that many students believe those doors. They carry them into adulthood and mistake the ceiling a teacher installed for a wall they constructed themselves. Fixed mindset language is a long-term wound dressed as honesty. The sixth breaking pattern, correction becoming identity. There is a critical line between correcting what a student did and labeling who they are. "You got that wrong" is a correction. "You never pay attention" is an identity assignment. The first invites improvement. The second invites surrender. When a teacher consistently links behavior to character, you are lazy, you are always the problem, you never try, the student eventually stops separating what they did from who they are. They absorb the label. They organize themselves around it, and labels given in the classroom become cages carried for years well beyond it. The seventh breaking pattern, the permission-denying classroom. This teacher controls everything. Students speak only when called upon, questions are treated as interruptions, any deviation from the expected path is shut down immediately. Independent thinking is read as defiance. In this classroom, students learn to wait. They learn to depend. They learn that their inner voice holds no authority in this space. The long-term consequence is severe. Those students carry the learned silence out of school and into their lives. They become adults who do not advocate for themselves, who mistake compliance for competence, and who never learned that their instincts were worth trusting. The eighth breaking pattern, the speed trap. This teacher sets the lesson pace to the fastest learners and then measures everyone else against that standard. Students who process slowly, who need repetition, who simply learn differently, they are quietly categorized as problems rather than people. The message they absorb is not, "I need more time." The message is, "I am too slow. I am not enough." Speed is not a measure of intelligence. Depth is. The teacher who honors depth over pace, who stays with a concept until the last learner lands, builds more genuine learners than one who rewards whoever finishes first. The ninth breaking pattern, visible indifference. Not every teacher who breaks students is loud or harsh. Some are simply absent, present physically but emotionally unavailable, delivering content, marking registers, assigning grades, never once looking a student in the eye and communicating, "I see you, you matter in here." Indifference is invisible damage. Students do not feel attacked by it, they feel erased. And being invisible inside a learning environment communicates something that cuts deeply. Your growth is not significant enough to notice. That silence does not disappear when the class ends. It travels, it settles, it shapes how students see themselves for years. The 10th breaking pattern, results-only vision. This teacher sees the grade and never the journey. They celebrate the score and ignore the struggle behind it. They praise the student who topped the test and overlooked the student who failed last term and earned a 60 this time, which by every honest measure was the greatest academic climb in the room. Results-only vision teaches students that their value is conditional, that attention is a reward reserved for high performers. Students internalize this and become adults who only feel worthy when they are producing at a measurable level. That emotional equation compounds quietly for decades. By now, you may be recognizing patterns, some from teachers you remember, some, if you are genuinely honest with yourself, from your own classroom. That recognition is not a reason for shame, it is the beginning of action. The teachers who have caused the most damage were rarely the ones with the worst intentions. They were most often the ones with the least self-awareness. You are here, watching this, examining your practice critically. That already separates you from the teacher who never asks. The only question that matters now is, what will you do with what you are learning? Let us go deeper into the psychology, because the impact of teaching style is not abstract. It has a neurological address. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for reasoning, problem-solving, and complex thought, does not operate at full capacity when the brain perceives threat. And threat, to a student's developing brain, is not only physical danger, it's a mocking tone, a dismissive wave, an impatient sigh. These social threats trigger the same fundamental neurological response as physical fear. The brain shifts into survival mode, it prioritizes escape over education, and it does this every single time, without exception, without apology. Cortisol is the body's primary stress hormone. When it floods a student's system, memory formation is directly impaired. Attention narrows, creative thinking shuts down. The student is physically present in the room, but neurologically unavailable for learning.
Here's what makes this especially significant. Cortisol is not only triggered by dramatic, acute events. Chronic low-level stress, the kind produced by a classroom where a student never quite feels safe, generates steady cortisol exposure across months and years. That sustained exposure literally reshapes the architecture of the developing brain. The teacher's emotional climate is not a soft consideration, it is a measurable biological variable. The amygdala is the brain's dedicated threat detection center. When it fires, it takes command. And critically, the amygdala does not distinguish between a physical predator and a teacher who sighs with visible frustration every time a particular student speaks. Both register as threat. Both produce the same survival response. Researchers call this an amygdala hijack, the moment emotional reactivity completely overrides conscious thought. In a breaking classroom, students experience these hijacks regularly, not with dramatic outbursts, quietly. They stop thinking and start surviving, and surviving from the outside looks exactly like not paying attention. Do not confuse the symptom for the cause. Abraham Maslow mapped this truth in 1943. Classrooms are still catching up. Safety comes before learning. When a student's deficiency needs, physical safety, emotional belonging, personal esteem, remain unmet, the brain cannot shift upward towards growth needs like knowledge, understanding, and self-actualization. Maslow's hierarchy inside a classroom means that if a student doesn't feel genuinely safe in your room, they cannot fully learn in it. The most brilliantly constructed lesson plan on Earth is irrelevant when a student's nervous system is in self-protection mode. Safety is not a prerequisite for great teaching. Safety is teaching, in its most foundational form. Between ages 5 and 12, children are actively constructing their academic self-concept, the internal narrative that answers the question, who am I as a learner? Am I capable? Am I the kind of person who can figure hard things out? Do I belong in academic spaces? These beliefs are not formed by test scores alone. They are formed by relationships, and most powerfully, by the relationship with the adult who presides over their learning. The teacher's voice, repeated across years, can become the student's inner voice. Plant belief, and it compounds as an asset. Plant doubt, and it compounds as a wound that outlasts every classroom. There's a concept called the Pygmalion effect, also documented as the Rosenthal effect. In a landmark study, teachers were told that specific students had been identified as high-potential learners. Those students were randomly selected, no special ability, no prior distinction, but the teachers believed the classification. By the end of the academic year, those students had genuinely outperformed their peers. The only variable was what the teacher believed about them. Belief changed teacher behavior, changed outcomes. This is not inspiration, this is documented science. What you hold about a student becomes the lens through which they eventually begin to see themselves. Mirror neurons are brain cells that activate both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing the same action. They are the neurological foundation of empathy and emotional contagion. In a classroom, this means that your emotional state is infectious. When you enter calm, grounded, and genuinely present, that state reverberates through every student in the room. When you enter tense, distracted, or dismissive, that reverberates too. Students do not simply observe your teaching, they feel it inside their own nervous systems in real time. The classroom climate is not just a space you create around your students, it is a space they inhabit internally. Students remember feeling before they remember facts. Ask any adult to recall primary school. They won't recite a formula. They'll tell you about a teacher who made them feel incapable, or a teacher who made them feel genuinely brilliant. The emotional memory is always the one that survives.
This is because the limbic system, which processes emotion, is deeply integrated with the hippocampus, which governs long-term memory formation. Emotion is the adhesive of memory. A learning experience that carries no emotional safety does not stick. One embedded in warmth, encouragement, and trust becomes a permanent part of who that student becomes. Now we turn to what building actually looks like, and it begins with a concept that sounds deceptively simple: psychological safety. A building teacher deliberately creates the condition where students believe they will not be punished or humiliated for asking questions, making mistakes, offering wrong answers, or challenging an idea. In classrooms where psychological safety is present, students learn faster, retain more, perform at higher levels, and recover from failure with significantly greater resilience. Psychological safety is not permissiveness. It is not the absence of standards. It is a strategic, intentional construction, one that gives the brain the conditions it needs to do what it was designed to do. The first pattern of a building teaching style: consistent warmth. This is the teacher whose emotional temperature does not fluctuate based on what happened before they walked through the door. They have made a professional decision. Regardless of what my personal life is carrying today, these students are owed my consistency. Consistent warmth does not require constant happiness. It requires emotional steadiness. Students can read the room when the teacher is stable, and that predictability is one of the most underrated forms of psychological safety available. When students stop spending energy monitoring the teacher's mood, they redirect that energy entirely toward learning. The second building pattern: the safe-to-fail classroom. In this classroom, mistakes are not punishments, they are data. When a student gets something wrong, the building teacher does not react with frustration or move quickly past the moment. They respond with deliberate curiosity. What happened there? Walk me through your thinking. Let us look at this together. That response transforms failure into a thinking exercise rather than a social verdict. Students begin to experience being wrong not as humiliation, but as the opening move of understanding. The safe-to-fail classroom consistently produces the most fearless, persistent, and intellectually courageous students in any school. The third building pattern: growth mindset language. This teacher has done the uncomfortable work of auditing their own vocabulary and has systematically removed fixed identity statements from it. In their place, process-affirming language. Not "you are so smart," but "that work showed genuine analytical thinking." Not "you are not trying hard enough," but "let us find a strategy that works better for you." Not "some people just get it and some don't," but "with the right approach and enough practice, you will get this." That language shift is not merely motivational, it is neurologically accurate, because the brain is not fixed, it grows, and the teacher's words can either confirm that truth or contradict it daily. The fourth building pattern: strategic correction. Building teachers correct differently. They separate the behavior from the person and the mistake from the identity. They do it privately whenever the situation allows. No audience, no performance of authority, no public display of who got it wrong. Instead, a direct, respectful, one-on-one conversation about what needs to change and why. Students who are corrected this way do not walk away feeling shamed. They walk away feeling guided. They do not feel targeted. They feel invested in. The student who is corrected with strategy tries again. The student corrected in front of an audience retreats. Your method outlives the moment. The fifth building pattern: naming strengths specifically. Generic praise, "good job," "very nice," "well done," is neurologically weak. The brain does not know what to strengthen because the signal is too vague to act on. Specific praise is an entirely different instrument. The way you broke that problem into smaller steps showed genuine analytical thinking. That sentence does three things simultaneously. It identifies the precise behavior, it attaches that behavior to a positive identity trait, and it gives the student a clear, repeatable strategy for next time. Specific praise is a roadmap to more of what works. Generic praise is just applause. One builds the learner, the other just feels good for a moment. The sixth building pattern: curiosity over compliance. The building teacher is fundamentally interested in students who obey. They are interested in students who think. Questions that challenge the lesson are welcomed. Unexpected answers are treated as exploratory paths rather than disruptions. When a student asks, "Why does it work that way?" the building teacher does not respond with, "because that's what the book says." They say, "That is exactly the right kind of question. Let us figure it out together." That exchange echoes for years. It sends the most important signal a classroom can produce. Your mind is genuinely welcome here. Ask, push, explore. You are safe. The seventh building pattern, visible progress systems. Building teachers don't just return graded papers, they track and make visible the trajectory of each student's growth. They say things like, "Do you remember how much this concept challenged you in September? Look at what you just did. That's the distance you've covered." Making growth visible activates what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, the drive that doesn't depend on external reward or comparison. Students begin competing with their past selves rather than against each other. And a student in deliberate competition with who they were yesterday is a student who is always in motion, always reaching, always capable of more. The eighth building pattern, the emotional check-in teacher. This teacher operates from a foundational understanding. Students do not arrive as blank academic vessels. They arrive as full human beings, carrying histories, pressures, family dynamics, and emotional states that have nothing to do with your lesson plan. The building teacher takes 30 seconds at the start of each lesson to read the room, to notice who seems withdrawn, to pause and say quietly, "Are you okay?" That 30-second investment communicates something a student may not hear anywhere else that day. You are a person first and a learner second. People learn better when they feel genuinely seen before they are asked to perform. The ninth building pattern, student voice as architecture. In the building classroom, students are not passive recipients of an education someone else designed entirely without them. They are invited to help shape it. Their input is solicited. They co-create classroom norms. Their honest reflections on the learning experience are treated as useful, actionable data. This is not chaos or soft management. This is ownership. And ownership is one of the most powerful psychological drivers of sustained engagement in any human being. When a student helped draft the rules, they are far more likely to honor them. When a student helped name the room's values, they are far more likely to embody them. The 10th building pattern, the teacher who repairs. This is perhaps the most underestimated building behavior in the entire profession. The building teacher acknowledges when they got something wrong, when they were too sharp, when they misread a student and the misread left a mark, when their frustration produced something they wouldn't choose again. They go back. They say, "I owe you an apology for how I handled that situation." That moment of deliberate repair accomplishes something that no amount of sustained warmth alone can produce. It models accountability in front of a young person. And a student who witnesses genuine accountability will internalize it far more deeply than any lesson designed specifically to teach it. Now let's place a number next to this. Studies examining classroom emotional climate consistently show that students can recall and describe the emotional atmosphere of their primary school years with remarkable clarity, decades later. They cannot reliably recite the content, but they remember whether they felt safe, whether they felt valued, whether they felt seen. The emotional temperature of your classroom is writing itself into the long-term memory of every student you teach. Right now, today, in this lesson, in the moment after a wrong answer, in how you said what you just said. This is your living legacy, not what you covered, what you created. This is the self-audit section, and it requires genuine honesty. The mirror you're about to stand in front of is the most professionally significant one you will ever use. Not the one in the staff room, not the one in your annual performance review, this one. The one that shows you what is actually happening inside your classroom, not from your vantage point, but from the students'. If you're ready, answer what follows as truthfully as you can. Not the teacher you intend to be, not the teacher you are on your best day, the teacher who shows up habitually every day, shaped by the patterns you have yet to examine. Audit question 1. When a student gives a wrong answer, what is your most immediate, most honest, most habitual first response? Do you pause, then guide them toward the thinking behind the error? Do you redirect with genuine patience, or do you move quickly on to another student? Do you sigh? Does something in your face, tone, or posture communicate disappointment in the person rather than simply in the answer? The student who answered incorrectly is watching your response with the same intensity they give the correct answer. That moment teaches more than anything else happening in your room right now. What lesson does it deliver? Audit question 2.
In the last full week of teaching, how many students can you recall addressing something specific and affirming to individually by name? Not a collective well done aimed at the room, a personal targeted acknowledgement of one student's individual effort or measurable growth. If that number is low, it's not a judgment, it's a gap, and gaps can be closed. Begin tomorrow. Select 3 students you rarely affirm specifically. Find one genuine, concrete thing to recognize
In each of them, repeat the following week. A habit that small, practiced consistently for one term, can shift the entire relational architecture of your classroom. Audit question 3. What does your classroom actually sound like when students are working independently? Is the silence present because students are deeply engaged and no help is readily available when needed? Or is it a silence born from fear, where students have learned that asking for help carries social or relational risk? And when a student does raise their hand, what does your response look like in the body before you speak? Is it welcoming? Is it patient? Or does something in your posture communicate that their need is an inconvenience you are managing? What is the actual felt experience of seeking help in your classroom right now? Audit question 4. Think about your 3 most disengaged students, the ones whose body language consistently communicates that they have already left the room, even while still physically seated in it. Now ask yourself a harder question. Have these students always been disengaged, or did something change? And if something changed, do you know what it was? If you do not know, have you ever asked? Disengagement in a classroom is almost never laziness at its root. It is almost always a response to accumulated defeat, to persistent invisibility, to the learned conclusion that engaging in this particular room does not lead anywhere worth the vulnerability of trying. Audit question 5. The body language audit. For one complete lesson, monitor your own physical presence with the same disciplined attention you give your content delivery. Notice where your body moves in the room. Do you gravitate consistently towards certain students and unconsciously away from others? Notice your expression when a student struggles. What does your face actually communicate in that moment? Notice your posture when a student asks a question you have answered many times before. What signal does it send? Students are reading your body in real time every minute of every lesson, using it to measure their safety. Your body is teaching a parallel curriculum. Make sure both lessons match. What do you do with the results of this audit? The first step is not a new strategy. The first step is acceptance. Clear-eyed, uncomfortably honest acceptance of what is currently true inside your classroom. Not with self-punishment, but also not with self-protection. The teacher who deflects and rationalizes, who reaches immediately for external explanations, will not change. The teacher who pauses long enough to say, "There is something here I need to address," that teacher has already begun growing. Acceptance is not the same as defeat. Acceptance is the doorway through which every meaningful professional transformation in the history of this work has always begun. Open it. The second step after acceptance is choosing a single targeted shift. Not an overhaul, not a reinvention, not a personality transformation. One deliberate shift practiced every day for 30 consecutive days. If your prominent breaking pattern is public correction, your shift is this. For 30 days, every individual correction is delivered privately. That is your only rule. One shift, 30 days, consistent execution. At the end of that period, you will observe something measurable in the room. A student who stopped volunteering now has their hand in the air. A student who used to sink in their seat now sits upright. One shift, compounding returns. The third step is reflection, not rumination. These two things look similar, but they operate entirely differently. Rumination replays what went wrong without extracting forward motion from it. Reflection examines what happened, pulls the lesson out of it, and applies that lesson to what comes next. At the end of each teaching week, commit 5 minutes to 3 questions. What moment this week would I want to replicate exactly? What moment would I handle differently given the chance? Which student needs more intentional attention from me next week? 5 minutes, 3 questions, written down. That practice, sustained consistently across a single term, will build more professional self-awareness than most formal training ever delivers. The fourth step is observation.
not as evaluation, but as data collection. Invite a trusted colleague into your classroom and ask them to observe one specific thing, not your content mastery, not your lesson structure. Ask them to watch how students respond physically in the moments after you correct them. Ask them to count how many distinct students you call on in a 40-minute period. Ask them to note which students receive regular eye contact from you and how frequently. This is not inspection. It is a gift of perspective that you cannot manufacture for yourself because you are always, by definition, inside your own blind spot. Someone else sees what you cannot. The fifth step is the one that demands the most professional courage. Ask your students, not in a way that opens the room to chaos or that undermines your rightful authority, in a structured, anonymous, written format. A simple reflection. What is one thing about this classroom that genuinely helps me learn? What is one thing that makes learning harder for me here? Read what comes back without defensiveness. Some of it will humble you in ways that are difficult. Some of it will validate what you already suspected. All of it will serve your growth, if you are willing to receive it without immediately explaining it away. The teacher who learns from students never stops growing. There's a story about a teacher who had been in the profession for 11 years. She was regarded as rigorous, consistent, and high-achieving. Her students passed exams. Her scores ranked above average term after term, but she sensed something missing in the relational texture of what she built. One day, she asked her students, anonymously, to write a single sentence about what her classroom felt like. The responses circled the same theme: safety, or the persistent absence of it. That feedback broke something open in her. She spent the following year rebuilding, not her standards, but her climate. The results stayed. The classroom became something it had never been before: a home. The teacher who builds does not only improve outcomes inside a classroom, they change the entire trajectory of a life. Consider what it means for one child to spend 6 formative years inside a building classroom. They enter secondary school already carrying the belief that they are capable. They enter adulthood willing to try, to fail without collapsing, and to try again with the same belief intact. They pursue opportunities that students broken by a teacher they can barely name never feel qualified to reach for. One building teacher multiplied across 30 students, multiplied across a career spanning 30 years, that is not classroom impact. That is civilization-level decision-making made daily. The breaking teacher also leaves a trajectory, simply not the one they intended. Consider the student who walked out of that classroom carrying a quiet conviction: I am not smart enough. That belief did not stay at the school gate. It traveled to the scholarship application they never submitted, to the opportunity they self-rejected before anyone else had the chance, to the way they raised their own children to expect less. The breaking teacher is rarely a villain. They were most often simply unexamined, but unawareness is not the same as neutrality. Unawareness has a direction, and that direction, unless actively corrected, always points away from who the student could have become. The pivot is always possible, not because transformation in teaching is easy or because lasting change requires no effort, but because the pivot does not demand a new personality or a different fundamental temperament. It demands one decision repeated across small daily moments: the decision to look, to ask, to correct privately, to praise with precision, to go back and repair what your frustration broke. These are not grand gestures requiring exceptional conditions. They are architectural decisions, and architecture determines what is possible inside any structure. Your classroom is the structure. You are the architect. You have always been the architect. Decide deliberately to build.
Small shifts produce seismic impact. That is not a slogan. That is the documented mechanics of how change actually operates inside complex systems. A classroom is one of the most complex emotional and cognitive systems on Earth. One small, consistent shift, introduced with genuine intentionality and maintained with professional discipline, creates ripple effects that touch every student, every day across the entire space. The building teacher does not attempt to overhaul everything simultaneously. They identify the one change that would produce the most good if made completely, and they make it completely. Mastery of one thing outperforms mediocrity across 10. Find your one thing, master it, then move to the next. Your teaching style is your legacy, and that legacy is being written right now. Not at retirement, not in the warm speeches at a farewell function, right now, in today's lesson, in how you responded to the student who could not get the answer 3 times in a row, in the 30 seconds after a student sat back down having read their work aloud to a room that did not respond the way they hoped. Your legacy accumulates in real time, decision by decision, moment by moment, classroom year by classroom year. The teacher who understands this does not wait for better circumstances to be a better teacher. They bring the better into today, right now. There's a student in your classroom right now who has not yet found their confidence. They are the quiet one, or the disruptive one, or the one who arrived pre-labeled by someone else's opinion before they ever sat down. They do not yet know what they are capable of, but somewhere in their developing brain is a potential waiting for one precise environment to activate it. That environment is safety. That environment is belief. That environment is a teacher who communicates through every small decision across every lesson. I believe you are capable of more than you currently think. That teacher changes what is possible for that student. Be that teacher. If you are watching this thinking it is too late for some of your students, hear this clearly. It is never too late to shift the climate. You cannot take back the words that have already left your classroom, but you can change every word that follows from today. Every building interaction deposited from this point forward adds something new to the account. The brain is far more elastic than the breaking experiences it has absorbed. The teacher who shows up differently tomorrow is not pretending the past did not happen. They are writing a new ending to a story that is still in motion. Your students need that new ending. So do you. Think about the teacher who genuinely changed your life. The one whose name you still say with something warm behind your voice. The one who saw something real in you before you could see it in yourself. That teacher was not born exceptional. They chose across hundreds of small daily decisions to show up with deliberate intention. They chose to build. And the fact that you remember them with that particular warmth, years or decades later, is proof that building leaves marks of a specific kind. The kind that outlast the school building. The kind that outlast the years between then and now. That kind of mark is available to every teacher. You have covered a significant amount of ground in this video. Breaking patterns, building patterns, the neuroscience behind both, the psychology that explains both, the self-audit questions, the pivot process. But information that does not move into action is simply expensive entertainment. Your students do not need you to be moved by these ideas. They need you to act on them. So here is your one action step. Not a list, not a system, not a framework. One step. Choose a single building pattern from what you have learned today. Write its name down. Make it your conscious, deliberate focus for the remainder of this week. 1. That is where real transformation begins. If this video reached you, here is what I ask of you next. Share it with one teacher you genuinely respect, the kind who takes their craft seriously and has the integrity to look honestly at their practice. Because the work of building students is not a solo endeavor. It is a culture, and cultures shift when a sufficient number of individuals within a community decide together to raise the collective standard. You cannot control what the wider school system does or what the staff room politics protect, but you control what happens inside your 4 walls entirely. That is your territory. Protect the standard you now hold inside it. Start today. If you are a teacher watching this and you recognize yourself inside the breaking patterns, this is not the conclusion of your story. This is the middle of it. And the middle is precisely where choices live. Every teacher who is now regarded as exceptional has a before, a season they look back on with something that sits between regret and tenderness, then a shift, followed by years of deliberate building. You are in the shift right now. You are deciding in this moment what kind of teacher the remaining years of your career will produce. That decision is not made in a single dramatic gesture. It is made in the daily moments. Choose them deliberately. If you are a school leader watching this, your responsibility extends well beyond your own classroom or your own instructional style. You are the architect of the entire school culture.
Every teacher in your building is either building or breaking, and the culture you actively protect determines which pattern dominates. Are you creating conditions where teachers can reflect on their practice without fear of immediate judgment? Are you modeling the building approach in the way you lead your staff? The school that consistently produces extraordinary teachers is the school that extends to its teachers the same care and intentionality it asks those teachers to extend to every student. Lead that school. If you are a parent watching this, you now have a vocabulary for what you may have been sensing but could not precisely name. The shift in your child's confidence, the reluctance to go to school that appeared from nowhere, the way they stopped asking questions at home about things they used to find endlessly interesting. You can advocate. Approach your child's teacher not with accusation, but with the language of what you now understand. My child needs a building environment. Here's what I have been observing. Here is what I am asking for. A parent who advocates with knowledge gives their child something irreplaceable, an adult who speaks the language of the room on their behalf. The truth that building teachers understand, though few of them ever articulate it in these exact terms, their primary job is not to transfer knowledge, it is to transfer belief. The knowledge is the vehicle, important, necessary, but not the final destination. The belief, I am capable, I can work through hard things, I belong inside academic spaces. That is the destination. The teacher who builds belief alongside content produces students who do not stop learning when the school year ends, because students who believe they are learners become lifelong learners. The classroom is temporary. The belief installed inside it is not. What belief are you installing in your students every single day? Building teachers are not born. They are built exactly the way they build their students. And the construction begins with a single commitment, to see the student's growth as the true measure of what teaching means. The teacher whose classroom centers their own authority, whose performance is the curriculum, and whose expertise is the primary event will always trend toward breaking. The teacher who defines their success entirely by whether the student in front of them is growing will always trend toward building. It's a posture shift, a philosophical reorientation, and it changes every single thing about how a teacher walks into a classroom and decides what matters most. You will not perfect this. That is not what is being asked of you. The goal is not a flawless teacher. The goal is a growing one. A teacher who makes the decision today that their classroom will be a measurably better environment for having them in it than it was yesterday. Not perfect, better. That word, better, is the most honest, most sustainable aspiration available to any professional. Perfect is a performance. Better is a practice. Practices do not require an audience or ideal conditions or formal recognition. They require a single thing, commitment, every day to the specific student sitting in front of you right now in this moment. There is a student in your classroom right now who may have made one small shift this week. They stopped correcting in front of the class, or they called a student by name and told them something specific and true about the quality of their thinking, or they went back to a student after a hard lesson and said, quietly, I was too harsh yesterday, and I owe you an apology. That shift happened without an audience. The school system did not see it. No award recognized it. But one student felt something in that room they had not felt before, possibly anywhere. That shift is the entire work. That is exactly what all of this is for.
Your teaching style is either building or breaking your students. You now know the identifying signs of both. You now understand the neuroscience behind both. You have the patterns, the psychology, the self-audit framework, and the pivot process. The only remaining variable is you. What you choose to do with what you now know. Whether you allow this to activate something lasting, or whether it becomes one more video that moved you briefly and then faded back into the noise. The difference between those two outcomes is not talent. It is not available time. It is not access to better resources. It is a single decision. Make it. Today. Right now. Before this video ends, I want to speak directly to the teacher who is burning out, the one who entered this profession because they genuinely cared, deeply, fully cared, and who has been slowly drained by a system that is not consistently cared back. This video was not built to add more weight to what you are already carrying. It was built to remind you of the power that remains entirely yours. Inside your classroom, what you choose to give cannot be taken by underfunding, by politics, or by a system that does not always see you clearly. That power, the power to build a human being who believes in themselves, has always been yours. It still is. 20 years from now, a former student of yours will be standing in a room making a consequential decision. A boardroom, a delivery room, a classroom of their own. And in that moment, something installed during their years with you will surface and quietly shape what they choose. The belief that they were capable enough to try. The knowledge that being wrong is not the same as being worthless. The confidence that they belong in rooms where important things are decided. These are the things you are installing right now, in today's lesson, in this week's corrections, in how you respond to the student who struggles. They will not remember the lesson, but they will live from what you gave them. Your classroom is not simply a room with desks and a board. It is a laboratory for human potential. Every day, experiments are in progress. Hypotheses about capability are being tested. Breakthroughs are waiting for the right conditions to emerge. And you, the teacher, are those conditions. You determine whether the experiments inside your room receive the environment they need to produce something extraordinary. The most under-resourced laboratory on Earth can produce world-class results when the internal conditions are right. Your classroom does not need to be perfectly equipped. It needs to be safe. It needs to believe in what it grows. You are the condition. You are always the condition. Subscribe, because this is what this channel is built to do. Not surface tips, not classroom decoration ideas, the deep work, the psychology, the systems, the identity, the strategy that produces not just improved lessons, but transformed teachers and schools that genuinely function as they were always meant to. If you are a teacher, a school leader, a parent, or someone who understands that education is one of the most consequential forces shaping the future, this channel was built for you. Hit the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. Share this with a teacher who needs to see it, and comment below, are you building or breaking right now? What is the one thing you are committed to changing first? Every student who walks into a classroom is carrying a question they have not yet learned to ask out loud. Am I worth the effort it takes to teach me well? Your teaching style answers that question every single day, in words and in silences, in patience offered and in patience withheld, in belief expressed openly and in doubt communicated without a single word. You are answering it right now. You will answer it again tomorrow. And the answer you give, consistently across hundreds of daily interactions and thousands of small decisions, is either building a human being from the inside out or slowly taking them apart. Choose to build. The world needs what your students will become.